Welcome to another episode of the Meal Prep Monday podcast. I'm your host, Allison Schaaf, and today I'm talking about my experience in cutting out TV, podcasts, yes, I said podcasts, and reading books for 1 week. Before getting into today's content, a reminder that if you have not tried out our time-saving meal prep meal plans, you can head to prepdish.com/MPM, short for Meal Prep Monday, and try out 2 weeks of our time-saving meal plans. You will get an organized grocery list, making ordering groceries or picking up at the grocery store super quick and easy. We tell you exactly what to buy. And then each night at mealtime, it is so easy because you already know exactly what you need to do. No having to think about things, right? Like, isn't that the ideal? You get to 5 o'clock and you just get to follow the instructions and get dinner done, but not think about it. So that is what I want for you this week. If you have not tried us out, I would encourage you to go to prepdish.com/MPM, 2 weeks free, no strings attached, see if it's a fit, and keep me posted on how it goes. Okay, so for today's episode, this is sort of a continuation. So if you haven't listened to last week's, it's not really like building off of it, but it is kind of like going down the same road, I guess, if that makes sense. So I have started a program or reading a book called The Artist's Way and doing a practice of journaling in the mornings. And it also includes, different questions. Like it's a 12-week program where there's weekly questions to answer and kind of like very like introspective and looking at things. And the way the questions work is I think you don't have to answer all of them. You kind of pick and choose the ones, I think she says pick and choose the ones that call to you, and then the ones you really want to avoid are the ones you should answer as well. And in addition to questions to answer, some of them are more like, projects or tasks to do for the week. And one of the weeks, she actually suggests giving up reading for the week. And part of the suggestion was, if you listen to last week's episode on, journaling and kind of getting out all of the clutter, I think it's like, for 1 week, reducing the amount of information you're bringing in. I do think that maybe this part of the book dates it a little bit. I think if it were written in today's day and age, it would say, no social media. So probably social media would be the big one. But the other thing, and it's really interesting, is like the week before she gave this task. So I didn't know this, like, hey, no reading for the week was coming up. I had told my husband, I said, I want to do an experiment where we give up listening to podcasts and watching TV for a week. And I think podcasts are great. And obviously I'm on one right now. You're listening to one. So I'm guessing you have an interest in podcasts as well. But I do notice that sometimes in the evenings or in the mornings as well, my husband and I, like one of us or both of us can get listening to a podcast and, maybe we're with the kids or we're with each other. And it really takes away from our experience together, right? Like, it's like, we're kind of, I'm like, hey, and like, he doesn't hear me because he's on his headphones and I know I'm guilty as well. And same thing, we actually don't have a TV in our house. So we're still screen free basically with the kids. But I will sometimes in the evenings have a show that I watch. And it's tricky because I often go to bed around the same time as the kids. So if I want to watch a show, I have to kind of do it while they're still up. And that really just kind of takes away from me being with them. I don't know. It's kind of that weird bedtime shuffle that, with a 2 and 4-year-old, we are still very much in most nights. So anyway, I decided that like, hey, let's do a week of no podcasts or TV and just see if bedtime and bath time. So that was the reason for me behind this initially, like, let's see if it goes more smoothly, like, because both of us will be less distracted, we'll be very present. So maybe that will like be the magic pill. Spoiler alert, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, like everything just magically got better. No, I don't think it's like a huge issue, but it definitely was a noticeable difference. And then it was interesting because the same week I wanted to do that, which I don't think was an accident. I would call it maybe synchronicity, but was the same week that Julia Cameron suggested like giving up reading for a week. And I was like, well, that's so interesting because I feel like reading to me, like, yes, it can be used as a distraction, but like I have to really fit in my reading time. Whereas I think podcasts and audiobooks. That's kind of like this in between, but like podcasts, audiobooks, and TV, it's like I force myself to make time for them, but they do sometimes end up being more of a distraction, even though like, podcasts can be very informative and all of that. It's like they can be a, distraction or pull away from like that presence you can have when with, other people. So anyway, we did a week of none of these kind of outside distractions. And I don't think that there was like, again, like this huge, like, oh my gosh, like this was such a world of difference, which is good because I didn't, personally, I wasn't like, I didn't want to be like, oh, this, we have this problem, like too much of all this stuff, because I do enjoy all three of those items. And I think it's just kind of figuring out like what's the best time and place for them. And are there times where they get in the way of kind of giving your chance in your body to like just be open and like not always be consuming. And I think this is way more challenging than like even when this book was written, because she was saying, oh, like the reading is a distraction. I'm like, oh my gosh, if that was if reading is the worst of my distractions, then I would be a lot better off. And I guess I didn't include social media on the list. I actually don't, and I did try and keep it limited. With Miscarriage Hope Desk and Prep Dish, like I do check in on those, kind of not daily, but a few times a week, just, for messages and things like that. So I knew for work, I didn't want to like, and I don't feel like lately that's been a huge issue for me. So like, I didn't have that be a thing that I cut out entirely. I did check in on my phone at the end of the week just to make sure. And, I had spent in total on Instagram an hour. So I thought for the week, that's pretty reasonable considering most of that was just kind of checking messages for work. And, maybe there was here and there some mindless scrolling, but again, I didn't go all in on that, cutting that out. So anyway, I don't know that I have for you today, like, hey, here's a big message of what, you should do or what I'm going to do now. I think it's just more, it was good to go a week without, to kind of be aware of like when and where I'm using all three of these, podcasts specifically, like, when I go for my walks, I do like listening to a podcast, and I think I go for like a longer walk, but sometimes it is nice to go for a walk and leave my phone back home and have it be in silence. And, when I'm doing my workouts, kind of the same thing when I'm lifting weights. Sometimes I like listening to a podcast, but other times it's nice to just kind of let that be some time of silence and having just, quiet. So just kind of figuring out that balance. And I think it's always good with anything in my life to kind of cut it out for a week or two just to see what it's like without, and then bring it back in and be intentional with it. I do that with things like caffeine from time to time, or, just anything, just to make sure I'm more aware and intentional of the place it has in my life and that I'm happy with that. So that was my little experiment. And then the other thing, which I might do a separate episode on, I haven't really figured out how I want to talk about this, but, and I don't know how much of an interest it would be to all of you. So maybe if you're listening and you're like, wow, that's really something I would like to hear more about, then let me know. But right now with our kids, like they are still screen free. And when I say that, sometimes my husband's like, well, that's not true. Cause like, yeah, they FaceTime or like, I don't know. So every now and then, like, they see that I watch TV sometimes on my computer. And so like, they're definitely aware of it. And like, if they've been on a plane with a screen in front of them and watch some cartoons, then like there, but I mean, it's less than once a week. So, and that's something, and I recently heard that like, anyway, I think that might be another episode. So if that's something you want me to go more in depth on, in some ways it's been a very intentional choice to be screen free with them, but in some ways it's also been, we are still screen free. So it's easier to stay that way than to figure out how to bring it in moderation. And I do think there probably is totally like a moderation place. It would be a perfectly fine place to be. I actually just think the easier way is to have it still be nothing versus like trying to figure out how to do just a little bit. So that's where I'm at right now. And it's nothing that they know enough to like ask for or be without. And I just see them like playing so much and being so creative and having so much fun just together and with their toys and with their imaginations, just like kind of creating things all the time. Like they're always like creating this little car and like going on a trip or doing all these little things. So that might be a future episode. Haven't figured out exactly how I want to pull that one together. But it was a lot easier to just talk about my experience here. So, if this inspires you to, well, gosh, I know. And I feel like was such a tricky episode too, of like, oh, give up podcast for a week. But I do think it's important to relook at, like, what are the inputs in your life? What are the outputs? And like, when are those moments where there aren't inputs? Like, when are those moments when you're just sitting outside with a cup of tea and like not inputting, or, doing the output of the journal, or, kind of a balance of like all of those, the input, the output, the like just sitting, for a little while. So, that was my experience this past week. Like I said, with this book, I don't have like a part 3 planned as of right now. I'm only about a quarter or a third, I guess, of the way through the program. So it's 12 weeks. So I have a feeling that I will be incorporating kind of some more takeaways or learnings that I've had into these podcast episodes, just because I like to, take what I'm learning and what I find interesting and use it as fodder for these episodes. So hopefully you're enjoying this little 2-week tangent. That's all I have though for this week. So if you have not, just a reminder, these episodes are all sponsored by Prep Dish. So if you have not tried out those meal plans and you're looking for a way to have easier, tastier, healthier meals at home, you can head to prepdish.com/MPM and give us a try for 2 weeks. It's, easy way to just see if this is a fit, if this is maybe the right time in your life, the right season for some help with meals, then give us a try. If you are enjoying these episodes, I would appreciate it if you could, maybe find one that you have a friend that would enjoy. If there's a specific episode, maybe it's today's, maybe it's one from a few weeks ago. Feel free to just shoot them a message and let them know, hey, here's a podcast I think you might enjoy. That just really helps to make sure that more people are hearing about this podcast and getting it out to more people. I really appreciate that. That's one of the highest compliments you can give, is sharing this with other people. So I will be back again next Monday with another episode.